Imagine a man who openly admitted to a staffer, "Vengeance is in my soul."
Wow. That's a heavy, almost Shakespearean statement.
It is. Now imagine that same man grew up so destitute, his mother worked as a laundress for local brothels, just to eat.
And then somehow he becomes one of the most powerful and consequential figures in American history.
It sounds like a character from a gritty novel, doesn't it?
It does. The truth is definitely stranger than fiction in this case.
Absolutely. Welcome back to the show. Before we get into this story, I want to be transparent with you. You were experiencing a unique two-host AI conversation, powered by Google's Notebook LM for deeper, more dynamic book analysis. Today, we are digging into The Game Changer, how Harry Reid remade the rules and showed Democrats how to fight by Jon Ralston.
And this book is brand new. It just dropped on January 20, 2026.
That's right. And for anyone who follows politics, especially in the American West, you know Jon Ralston. He's not just a reporter. He is an institution.
CEO of the Nevada Independent. He's been covering Nevada politics for, 35 years?
35 years.
And that's the key here. This isn't a biography written by an academic from the outside looking in. Ralston was there. He was in the trenches. And what he presents in The Game Changer is less a simple biography and more a case study in Machiavellian power.
Right.
The real premise asks a difficult question. Did Harry Reid's willingness to remake the rules, to break norms, did that ultimately save the country, or did it break the Senate forever?
That is the central question. And to even begin to understand the Senate Majority Leader, we have to go way back to Searchlight, Nevada.
A place Ralston describes as a tiny, hardscrabble hamlet.
Hardscrabble feels like a polite term for it. The book paints a picture of a dusty crossroads in the absolute middle of nowhere.
And we aren't talking about working-class poverty. This was extreme.
Ralston details that Reid's childhood home was, well, he calls it ramshackle. It was built from railroad ties. It was not a place of comfort.
No, and the details about his parents are just stark. His father, as Ralston notes, struggled with severe alcoholism.
And, as he mentioned, his mother washed clothes for the local brothels. That one detail just grounds you in the reality of it. This was survival mode.
It really was. And Searchlight was so isolated, there wasn't even a high school.
So to get an education, Ralston explains, Reid had to leave home and board with relatives in Henderson. He was on his own from a very young age.
With no safety net.
Exactly, no safety net at all.
And that isolation is just so crucial to understanding the man he became. Ralston analyzes this not just as a sad backstory, but as the forge that created Reid's quiet persistence.
So the argument is that his bare-knuckle style we saw in the Senate wasn't some political strategy he learned in Washington.
No, it was a survival mechanism he learned in the desert. He learned toughness before he ever learned politics.
And that toughness was immediately put to the test in what I think is the most cinematic part of his career, the Nevada Gaming Commission.
Oh, this section of the book reads like a Scorsese movie.
Right. So we jump to the late 70s. Reid is chairman of the Nevada Gaming Commission from 77 to 81. And his job description is just terrifying. Exterminating mob influence from the casinos.
Just think about that. Late 70s, Las Vegas was still very much the Wild West of organized crime. Ralston highlights this was a take-no-prisoners culture.
You weren't fighting political opponents with negative ads. You were fighting people who used car bombs.
It was legitimately dangerous. The book even details that Reid himself was investigated by the FBI for alleged mob connections.
A fascinating detail, isn't it? It shows how murky everything was.
Very. Ralston describes this whole period as formative and hardening Reid's political instincts.
I mean, you have to imagine if you can stare down the mob, if you can handle death threats, a debate on the Senate floor probably doesn't seem that intimidating.
It creates a different threshold for pressure. And we can't talk about this time without mentioning the mentor figure Ralston introduces, Mike O'Callaghan.
The former governor of Nevada.
Yeah, right. And he wasn't just a boss, he was a teacher. Ralston credits him with teaching Reid the dark arts, so to speak. Deal-making, practical compromise.
He taught Reid, you don't have to like the person across the table to get what you want from them.
You just have to know what they want.
A lesson he clearly took to heart. But here's something that surprised me in the book. You look at Reid's career, the power he had, and you assume he was this electoral machine. But Ralston says he wasn't. Well, he wasn't a natural winner.
Not at all. His career is defined by these razor-thin margins.
I mean, listen to these numbers from the author. Reid lost a Senate race early on by fewer than 700 votes.
So close.
And then he wins his 1986 Senate seat by fewer than 500 votes. 500. It's a rounding error.
He even failed in a bid for Las Vegas mayor. He wasn't charismatic. He wasn't a Bill Clinton or a Barack Obama. He was a grinder. He was awkward.
Which really underlines that quiet persistence theme. But let's unpack something I found really intellectually demanding in the book. As Reid climbed the ladder, his beliefs seemed to drift.
Or evolve, maybe. This is a critical part of Ralston's analysis. He documents the evolution, and it is a stark shift.
So what are we talking about?
Well, Ralston notes that early in his career, Reid supported a right-to-life amendment, firmly anti-abortion. He opposed protections for gay people.
The book even says he proposed abolishing birthright citizenship.
Yeah.
That's a position that today would be considered hard right.
It is. So Ralston poses the question, was it a genuine evolution of principle, or was it about power?
What's the book's verdict?
The analysis leans heavily toward pragmatism. As the Democratic Party shifted left, Reid shifted with it. Ralston argues he just prioritized results over consistency.
Adapt or die.
Yeah.
That Searchlight survival instinct again. He saw the demographics of the country changing, and he wasn't going to let ideology get in the way of a win.
Exactly. He saw the Senate as a tool to get things done, not a philosophy club.
Before we get to the most controversial Senate maneuver in modern history, and we are definitely going there, we want to mention our YouTube channel, Mindful Moments. It offers AI book analysis, inspiring reflection, and rational thought. It's a great way to keep feeding your brain.
Definitely check that out. But now we have to look at how Reid actually used this power. Because Ralston calls the book the game changer for a reason.
Right. And a perfect example of his long game is the story of Senator Arlen Specter. This feels like a masterclass in patience.
It really is. So for context, Arlen Specter was a longtime Republican senator. The Democrats were on the verge of a supermajority, that magic number of 60 votes.
Let's quickly define that. In the Senate, you need 60 votes to break a filibuster, to stop the other side from talking forever. So getting to 60 means you can pass almost anything.
Exactly. And Reid needed Specter to switch teams. Ralston describes his strategy not as a sudden push, but as a deliberate, unhurried approach.
He courted him, promised to protect his seniority. He just waited.
And that patience paid off. Getting Specter gave the Democrats that control at a crucial moment. And that control led to the big legislative wins Ralston highlights.
The Affordable Care Act, Dodd-Frank, the stimulus bill, none of that happens without Reid's maneuvering.
And the book spends a lot of time on his partnership with Nancy Pelosi.
Yes, Ralston portrays them as this devastatingly effective duo. Pelosi whipping the votes in the House, Reid navigating the maze of the Senate. Passing Obamacare wasn't just policy, it was procedural warfare.
And speaking of warfare, we have to talk about the 2010 election. This is one of my favorite anecdotes in the book because it's so bizarre.
Okay, the context is key. It's 2010. The Tea Party wave is cresting. It's a brutal year for Democrats. Reid is unpopular. He's on the ropes against Sharon Angle. And then chickens happen.
Yes, the chicken comment. Ralston details this as a massive turning point. Sharon Angle, in a moment of, well, maybe too much candor, suggested that people could barter with doctors for health care.
Specifically mentioning trading chickens for a checkup.
Essentially, yes. It made her look completely unserious. And Ralston uses this to illustrate that while Reid was a master tactician, he was also just incredibly lucky sometimes.
But, and this is the key, he knew exactly how to exploit that luck. He hammered it. He defined her before she could define hers.
Oh, absolutely. He showed no mercy.
That ruthlessness again. But let's pivot to the moment where that ruthlessness might have backfired, or at least had consequences that are still shaking things up today. The nuclear option.
This is the heavy stuff. This is the structural change. In 2013, Harry Reid triggered the so-called nuclear option.
Let's break that down. We talked about the filibuster needing 60 votes. Reid changed the rules so that for lower court nominees, you only needed a simple majority, just 51 votes.
And Ralston explains why. Republicans were blocking almost every single one of President Obama's nominees. The government was grinding to a halt. Reid argued that the obstruction was unprecedented, and he had to save the presidency's ability to function.
Correct. But Ralston points out the deep irony here. Years earlier, when Republicans threatened to do the exact same thing, Reid had opposed it, called it dangerous, said it would ruin the Senate.
So there's that pragmatism again. When it suited him to block it, he blocked it. When it suited him to use it, he used it.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Tragic, depending on your point of view. Ralston connects the dots directly to today.
He does. The expert insight is undeniable. By breaking that seal, by weakening the filibuster for lower courts, Reid unknowingly opened the door. He set the precedent.
And when Republicans took power under Mitch McConnell, they used Reid's own precedent.
To remove the filibuster for Supreme Court nominees.
Which is how you get 3 conservative justices under Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, Barrett. None of them needed 60 votes.
Ralston presents this as the duality of Reid's legacy. He saved the judiciary in the short term, filling those courts with Obama's judges, but he altered the institution forever. He won the battle, but Ralston asks, did he lose the war?
That's the question the book just leaves hanging over you. And it connects to the personality of the man himself. There's this fascinating meta-narrative in the book because Jon Ralston and Harry Reid, they were not friends.
No, not at all. Ralston is very open about it. He writes that they had a long-running feud.
Feud is putting it mildly. The book details that Reid went long stretches without even speaking to him. But then he actually tried to get Ralston fired.
Multiple times. And Ralston notes he eventually succeeded in getting him removed from a TV station. It really shows the vindictiveness Reid was capable of.
And Reid didn't hide it. That quote we started with, "Vengeance is in my soul." That was Reid talking to a staffer. He owned his grudges.
And that's what makes Ralston's portrait so compelling. He doesn't sanitize Reid. He portrays him as quietly persistent, yes, but also deeply resentful, willing to do what others wouldn't. There was a lack of shame about the exercise of power.
It's a character study of a man who didn't care if you liked him as long as you respected or feared him.
Precisely. He was looking for results.
As we wrap up, we have to look at the legacy he left behind on the ground. The blue wall in Nevada.
This is the other side of the coin. For all the controversy, Reid built a machine. Ralston details how he organized the unions, built the party infrastructure, and turned Nevada, a reliable red state, into a blue stronghold.
And he blocked Yucca Mountain.
That was his holy grail. The federal government wanted to dump the nation's nuclear waste in Nevada, and Reid, almost single-handedly, stopped it. He simply outmaneuvered the entire federal government.
So we're left with this incredibly complex image. A boy from Searchlight, a mob fighter, a master legislator, a vindictive partisan, and the builder of modern Nevada.
It brings us right back to that core question the book poses. In a political system defined by deadlock, was Harry Reid a necessary evil? Did he show Democrats how to fight fire with fire? Or was he the architect of the dysfunction we see today?
It's something to really think about. If you break the rules to save the game, do you eventually just destroy the game itself?
A provocative thought to end on.
Absolutely. If you want to dive even deeper into the details, the legislative battles, and the incredible stories from Nevada, you need to check out the full analysis. Click the link on screen for the in-depth book analysis. Subscribe, share, purchase via the link, and think critically.
And don't forget to check out the many genre-based book podcasts at Mindful Moments. Nourish your mind on the go.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you in the next deep dive.